This is Honorable Ken Simi once again. Kenya has been faced with quite a number of challenges. And the current one, of course, being the floods that have been ravaging this country. We have seen heavy rainfall, disrupting our normal life system. We have seen cases where floods have been able to sweep away almost the entire village. And one of the things that we should be asking ourselves is that climate change is a reality with us now. We have been able to move from drought and famine to floods, then to cyclones. In 2014, for those of you who remember, we had a serious drought in this country, and the Kenyan government declared a national disaster. A drought that had really ravaged especially the arid and the semi-arid regions of Kenya. I remember Turkana County was worst hit, and that time we had about 1.6 million Kenyans who were affected. In 2015 again, there was another drought again that affected quite a number of people. About 1.1 million people were really affected. There was lacked food, lacked water, life was disrupted. And this drought persisted up to 2017. And again, the national government, the Kenya government under Uhuru Ruto government, declared a national disaster, where we had almost 23 counties out of 47 were really affected. There were food shortage. There was no rainfall in these places completely. And about 2.7 million people were affected. I'm trying to give a background on what really happens in this country, that we cannot sit down as a country and be able to map out a strategy that will be able to counter any emergencies, any disasters that befalls a country. We have moved from those drought, famine. During that time, agriculture did not perform completely. Some of those regions, there was massive crop failure. Some of those regions, there was a lot of loss of livestock. People lost their income. Of course, the government came in by trying to buy the livestock, but it was too little, too late. There was a humanitarian crisis. Of course, the government mobilized the resources. It was a disaster fund that was created. We had other development partners coming on board to be able to meet the humanitarian agencies, the humanitarian aids, providing food, providing water, providing shelter, providing for kids who are school-going kids who had their studies even disrupted. We had Kenya Red Cross coming on board. We had NGOs. We had what we were calling Kenya for Kenyans. Kenyans pulling resources together to respond to that. Education was completely disrupted, especially in those places. Schools were closed. There was no food for students. There was no water for students. And most of these people, especially in those arid regions, most of them are nomads, so they were moving all over. And some of the kids in school missed their parents. In 2022, again, there was another famine. As if that was not enough, about 4.5 million people were affected again. And the government spent close to about 30 billion Kenya shillings to be able to medicate, to be able to meet the challenges by providing food, providing drugs, providing shelter, providing beddings and so forth for this, humanitarian crisis. But now come 2023, I think around May, the Meteorological Department issued an alert to the government. And I'm sorry to quote this because even the head of state at one time refuted and said there will be no El Nino. Come this year in March, and we were in for a root shock because floods ravaged the country. And you have seen that floods have been very, very devastating in this country. And the question that I'm asking myself, has the government done enough, or Kenyans done enough to avoid similar occurrences in the near future? Because the Meteorological Department has also sounded an alarm that next year chances of us having a drought are very high. But remember, the impacts of the floods on this economy have been very high. In my own assessment, and I'm sure the national government is still doing the assessment, county government are still doing the assessment on the cost of these floods on the Kenyan economy. We will not be talking of less than 100 billion. 100 billion is enough money to be able to ensure that the dams that were constructed meet the threshold so they can hold water, and if there is an overflow, they will not burst and be able to kill people like what happened in Mai Mahiu. Because what happened in Mai Mahiu was a question of lack of total preparedness. And unfortunately, most of these occurrences happen at night. And you can imagine an entire village, an entire town is swept off. 58 people lost their lives. So many people have not been accounted for. And I'm sure the figure will keep on rising to the detriment of our people. So one of the things that we need to ask ourselves is that, do we have adequate early warning system? And if we have we been able to respond to the early warning system so that we put various mitigation measures in place so that we do not incur the same scenario? For example, today, the president declared a national holiday where people are supposed to be planting trees. But you see, it is on a short notice that when you take a cross-check across the country, very many people do not know what to do. Because one, there has not been proper coordination and planning, so that each and every Kenyan will be planting at least a tree today or trees today. And we are almost 56 million. Even if you said that 30 million will have participated, and each and every person plants even 5 trees, today will be doing more than 100 million trees on average. So I think we are at a point where the government must come out clearly and let the respective agencies be able to plan in advance, put resources in advance, and be able to put preparedness mechanisms and systems in place so that we do not have the knee-jerk reaction that like what we are seeing today. Today, as we are speaking like this, there is an outbreak of cholera at the coast. There's an outbreak of cholera in Nyanza. And many places are going to experience a similar thing. So you realize that lack of our preparedness is a big cost on our economy, because we are going to spend a lot of money to treat and prevent diseases that will have not been there. We have loss of income. I know next year we will be in for a root shock because we will be having shortage of food. In Trans Nzoia, most of the farms are now flooded. Most of the maize have been swept away. Trans Nzoia is the granary of this country. So if we have these floods ravaging the parts of the country, we are likely to have famine next year. And when we have famine, what happens? We will import food, and that alone is a cost on our exchequer. And we need to be able to introduce conservation measures that should be to the core of this country. If you have been in Trans Nzoia, like myself, was born and raised in Trans Nzoia, you will find that most of the forests that were there when we were growing up, most of those forests were cleared, and now they have been converted into shambas We have Kitalala phase 1 up to 3. Those were forest areas. You will pass around there and there will be a lot of rainfall in that region. Scientists have been able to say that for every tree, for every mature tree, it is able to hold about 200 liters of water in that stem and underground. So if you have 1,000 trees in a place, you can imagine how much liters of water is being held. It's not running helter-skelter. But you see, because we have been greedy in our nation, destroying the forest covers, in the name of providing more lands. When you go to Trans Nzoia, some of those hills, the Tambe Hills, Index Hills, that were once, forested, people have now encroached and now they're building on top of those hills. Very soon we'll be having landslides. But I think one of the worst things that happened to this country was when we disregarded the famous Chiefs Act. I remember some of you who grew up in the 90s and 80s and, behind, you realize that chiefs did a lot when it came to an environmental conservation. A chief will not allow anybody to do farming some 10 meters from any water body, whether it's a river, it's a lake, a water pond, or anything that is a water body, because the chiefs had powers to arrest and prosecute. But since we discarded the Chiefs Act, and Kenyans being who they are, they have become, law unto themselves. Now the chiefs are powerless. The police are powerless, or some of the police combining with Kenyans and the culture of taking bribes, and our rivers are drying up. Our forests are no longer there. So when it rains, floods are all over. So I want to challenge the government and Kenyans that it's time we took things seriously. It is time we be able to implement the information that we have ever learned in school. That information was not in vain. It was meant to safeguard our nation, our livelihood, our heritage as a country. And for this, I want to say, for those that lost their lives, I say sorry, Pole, and for those that lost their livelihood and properties, I pray that next time we become a bit more wiser, more conservative in our way of doing things. Thank you, Kenyans, for listening to me. I will really appreciate any positive criticism. There could be positive or negative. Please, I welcome you, Kenyans. Thank you.